welcome to the next edition of the BriefingsDirect podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on the latest insights into data center strategies. There's never been a better time to build an efficient, protected, powerful, contained, and modular data center. Yet many enterprises and public sector agencies cling to aged, vulnerable, and chaotic legacy IT infrastructure. Stay with us now as we examine how automation, self-healing, and increasingly intelligent data center designs and components are delivering what amounts to data centers as a service. Here to help us learn more about a modern data center strategy that can extend to the computing edge and beyond is Steve Lalla, Executive Vice President of Global Services at Vertiv. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Dana. Pleasure to be here today.
We're glad to have you. Steve, when we look at the evolution of data center infrastructure, monitoring and management software and services have really come a long way. What's driving the change for need now? Even though we've got an evolution of the technology, it seems to me that there are market forces that are making that technology perhaps more prescient, more needed than ever.
Yeah, hey, Dana, that's a great question. I think there's a number of trends that are taking place. I think the first is really the products that we're building and the capabilities of those products. They're getting smarter. They're getting more enabled. Moore's Law continues. And what we're able to do with our individual products is just improving as we progress as an industry. The other piece that's very interesting about this is not only how the individual products are improving, but how we connect the products together, the connective tissue of the ecosystem, and how those products increasingly operate as a subsystem is really helping us deliver differentiated capabilities, differentiated performance. So I think one is products are becoming smarter and they're becoming more interconnected. I think the second piece that's incredibly important is connectivity. Whether it's wide area connectivity or local area connectivity, over time, all of these products need to be more connected both inside and outside of the ecosystem. That connectivity is going to enable new services and new capabilities that don't exist today, and we can spend more time chatting about that. So I think connectivity is kind of a second important element. I think third is that data is exploding. So as these products get smarter, as they work more holistically together, as they get more connected, they're also providing manufacturers and customers more access to data. And that data is going to allow us to move from a break-fix type of environment into a predictive environment. It's going to allow us to offer more as a service versus on-prem. And then when we look at the ecosystems themselves, we know that over time, these centralized data centers, whether they be enterprise data centers, colo data centers, or cloud data centers, over time, we're going to see the deployment of more edge-based data center, more modular-based data centers. And as that occurs, all the things we talked about, smarter products, more connectivity, data, and data enablement, they're going to be even more important as those modular data centers become increasingly populated in a distributed way. And so to manage them, to service them is going to be increasingly more difficult, but important. And then one final cultural piece I would say is happening is that a lot of the folks who interact with these products and service these products, we have this thing that I like to call knowledge thinning, which is the highly trained professionals, especially in the power side of our ecosystem, that talent is reaching a retirement age. There's a high demand for their skills as our data center growth continues to be robust. And so that knowledge thinning needs to be offset with some of the things I talked about earlier. So there's a lot of really interesting trends underway right now that impact the industry and are things that we at Vertiv are looking to respond to and to proact on.
And Steve, these things, when they come together, form, in my thinking, a whole greater than the sum of the parts. Why should we start thinking about, when you put this all together, the intelligence, the efficiency, even making things more automated and dealing with the culture of skills? How does that get to this notion of data center as a service? How should we think about data centers differently?
Yeah, well, I think as with all things, Dana, one size does not fit all. So I always am cautious about generalizing because our customer base is so diverse. But there's no question that in areas like the modular data center, in areas where customers would like us to be more operating their products and their equipment instead of them having to do it, operating a data center as a service reduces the challenge with knowledge thinning, reduces the issue of optimizing products because we have our eyes on all those products on their behalf. And so we enable through the connectivity, what kind of data the product delivers, and the data lakes that we're building to be better at predicting what we should do. Increasingly, our customers can partner with us to help them actually have a better performing data center.
Well, it seems quite compelling, Steve, that modernizing has lots of return on investment, doing more with less, modernizing, getting data, getting more predictive about understanding, requirements and then fulfilling them. Why are people still sort of stuck? What holds organizations back? I know it will vary from site to site, but why the inertia? Why don't people run to this? It seems like a no-brainer to want to improve that data center, seeing as it's so integral to every business now.
Yeah, well, let's start with, these are big, complex pieces of equipment, right? And they're not the kind of equipment that every year you decide that you're going to change. So I think one of the key factors that affects the rate at which connectivity, technology, processing capability, data liberation capability, the speed at which that gets adopted is in some way predicated by the speed at which customers are able to change out the equipment that they currently have in their data centers. Now, I actually think we as a manufacturer have taken and have a responsibility to do what we can to improve those products over time and make new technology solutions backwards compatible, whether it's through updating communication cards, building adjunct solutions like we do with ICOMS and gateways, really figuring out how to take that equipment that is going to be there for 15, 20 years and make it as productive and as modern as you can, given that it's going to be there so long. So number one, the duration of product in the environment is certainly one of the headwinds, if you will. I think another is this concept of connectivity. And again, different customers have different comfort levels with connectivity inside and outside of the firewall. Clearly, the more connected we can be with the equipment, the more we can update the equipment potentially, the more we can assess the equipment's performance. And here's what's really important: assess its performance against a big data lake of other products that are operating in an ecosystem. So I think connectivity and really having the right solutions to provide for great connectivity is important. And then I think there's some cultural elements to our business in that, hey, if it works, why change it, right? If it's performing the way you need it to perform and it's delivering on the power and cooling needs of the business, why make a change? And again, I think that's a little bit on our responsibility to work with our customers to help them best understand that when new technology gets added, when new cards get added, and when new assistants, I call them, digital assistants get added, that technology actually will have a differential effect on the business. So I think there's a bit of a cultural piece that gets in the way of that sometimes.
So I suppose it's imperative for organizations like Vertiv to help organizations move over that hump to get to the higher level solutions and overcome the obstacles, because there are some significant payoffs. It also sets them up to be much more able to adapt to the future when it comes to edge computing, which you mentioned, and also being a data-driven organization. So first, tell us a little bit about Vertiv, how you're differentiating yourselves in the industry, and how combining services and products amounts to a solution that helps organizations modernize.
It's a great question, Dana, and I really do think we have a differentiated perspective on this. So when we think about service and we think about technology and product, we don't think about them as separate. We think about them all together. And, my responsibility is kind of to combine that software and service ecosystem into something that is more efficient, helps our customers have more uptime, becomes more predictive versus break-fix, just-in-time type services. And the way we do that is really kind of through three steps. Number one, I hit earlier in our conversation. We have to continue to work closely with our product teams to really ensure early in the product definition cycle when products or what products need to be able to do to be interconnected into an as-a-service or a self-service ecosystem. And so we spend quite a bit of time impacting the roadmaps and putting requirements into the product teams so that they have a better understanding of what, in fact, we can do once data and information gets liberated. So a great strategy always starts with great product, and that's core to our solution. And then kind of the next step is that we have a clear understanding that some of our customers will want to service equipment themselves, and many of our customers will want us to do that for them, whether it's physically service the equipment or monitor and manage the equipment remotely, like with our life management solution. And so we increasingly are looking at that as a continuum. Where does self-service end and where does Vertiv delivered services begin? In the past, it's been relatively different in what we do from a self-service and delivered service perspective, but increasingly you see those being blended together because customers want a seamless handover that when they discover something is needed to be done, we at Vertiv can pick up from there and actually go perform that service. So the connective tissue between self-service and Vertiv delivered service is something that we're increasing clarity on. And then finally, we talked about this a little bit earlier as well. We are being very active at building a data lake of data and information that comes from all of the ecosystems I just talked about. We have billions of rows of normalized data in our data lake, and we can talk a little bit later about how we're using that data to benefit our customers as we speak.
And it sounds, Steve, like when you service a data center, when you provide that solution level through a partnership, an ecosystem of players, that it reminds me of when organizations started to be able to manage their PCs remotely, that they didn't have to be there. They didn't have to be on site. You could bring the best minds and the best solutions to bear on a problem, regardless of where the problem is and regardless of where the expertise was. Is that what we're starting to see now develop on the data center level?
Well, I think, let's first be super clear, right? To upgrade software on a UPS is a lot harder than to upgrade software on a PC. But I think the analogy or the metaphor maybe is a better word. I think your metaphor of really best understanding what has to be done in person and what can be done remotely is a good metaphor, and you're correct. Over years and years of improvement in the IT ecosystems, we went from a very much in-person type of experience fixing PCs to one where very much like mobile phones, they are kind of self-aware and self-healing. This is why I talked about the connectivity concept or connectivity imperative earlier, because if they're not connected, then they're not aware. And if they're not aware, they don't know what they need to do. And so talking about the trends earlier, connectivity is a super important trend. And with it will allow us to do more things that can be done remotely versus always having to do things in person, which will reduce the amount of interference we as a provider of services have on our customers. It'll allow them to have better uptime. It'll allow them to have better ongoing performance and even over time allow maybe some tuning of their equipment. So I think, we're at the early stages of that journey. You could argue the phone and the PC guys are at the very late stages of the journey of automation. I would say we're in the very early stages of it, but the things we talked around earlier, smarter products, connectivity, data, all are important factors in influencing that.
I suppose another evolution in all this is that there's more standardization, even at the data center level. We saw standardization as a necessary step at, say, the server and storage level when things were just too chaotic, too complex. We saw standardization as a result of virtualization as well. Is there a standardization taking place within the ecosystem and at that lower infrastructure support, the foundation of data centers?
Well, I think there has been a level of standardization in place in what I call that self-service layer with protocols like BACnet and Modbus and SNMP that at least allows a monitoring system to ingest information and data from a variety of diverse devices for minimally being able to monitor how that equipment is performing. And so I don't disagree that there is an opportunity for even more standardization because that'll make that whole self-service, delivered service as a service ecosystem more efficient. But I do think what we see is in that control plane, which is really Vertiv's unique special sauce, we're able to do things between our products with solutions like ICOM-S that allows our thermal products to work better together than if they were independently operating. So I think you're going to see an evolution of continued innovation in peer-to-peer networking in the control plane that probably will not be open and standard, but will provide advances in how our products work together. I think you'll see in that self-service as a service, delivered service plane, continued support for open standards and protocols so that we can manage more than just our own equipment and our customers can manage and monitor more of their equipment. And then I think this special sauce, which are these data lakes and algorithms, I think will probably stay, there's a lot of intellectual property and capital in building those algorithms and those outcomes that help customers operate better. And I think those, will probably stay a little more close to the vest in the short term, and we'll see where it goes over time.
You mentioned moving data centers to the edge. We're really hearing an awful lot architecturally about the rationale for not moving the data to the cloud or to the data center, but moving the computational capabilities right out to the edge where that data is, because it's streaming in massive quantities and needs to be analyzed in real time. But that used to be the domain of the operational technology, the OT people. As we think about data centers moving out to the edge, it seems like there's a bit of an encroachment or even a cultural clash between the IT way of doing things and the OT way of doing things. How does Vertiv fit into that, and how does making data center as a service help bring the OT and IT together, again, to create a whole greater than the sum of the parts?
Yeah, well, I think you just hit it there. So I think maybe there was a clash. I think you can almost view those what we call modular data centers. And some of them could be things like Smart Isle, Smart Row that we do today. Some could be fully contained standalone systems. Increasingly, we're working with very strategic IT partners on understanding how that ecosystem has to work as a complete solution, not power cooling separate from IT performance, but how can we take the best of the OT world, power and cooling, and the best of the IT world, combine that with things like alarms and fire suppression systems, and really sort of build a management and monitoring solution that can be outsourced if you wanted to consume it as a service, or insourced if you want to be able to do it yourself. And there's a lot of work to do in that space. And again, I would say as an industry, we're in the early stages, but I don't think it's hard to foresee that a modular data center should operate kind of holistically as opposed to just the sum of its parts.
So I was thinking that the OT-IT thing was an issue to deal with at the edge, but it sounds like you're also referring to it within the data center itself. So maybe flesh that out a bit. Why is OT and IT together just managing all of the systems components, complexity, infrastructure, support elements? How does that work in this more intelligent approach and data center as a service approach?
It's a great question. And certainly there's the DSIM approach, which is let's bring it all together and manage it. I think that's one way of thinking about OT and IT, and certainly Vertiv has solutions in that space with products like Trellis. But I actually think about it as once the data is liberated, how do we take the best of computing solutions, data analytics solutions, and stuff that was born in other industries, and apply that to how we think about managing, monitoring, servicing all of the equipment that is in our industrial or OT space. So I think it's not necessarily OT and IT are one thing, but how do we apply the best of technology solutions? Things like security, right? There's a lot of great stuff that's emerged from a security prevention or for security, a security solutions perspective in the IT space, that if we're going to get more connected in the OT space, let's learn from what's gone on in IT and see how we can apply it to OT. And so I think I don't think it's as much like, hey, just DSIM, because of course DSIM has been tackled for years. I think it's more of taking the best of each world and seeing how you can put those together to provide a solution that's differentiated. And I go back to our ICOM-S solution, which uses desktop computing and gateway technology and application development running on a high-performance IT piece of gear connected up to OT gear to get those products that normally would work separately to actually work more seamlessly together, which provides a better performance, a better efficiency than if each of those products operated separately. ICOM-S is a great example of where we've taken the best of the IT world, compute technology, connectivity, and the best of the OT world, power and cooling, and built a solution to make that interaction differentiated in the marketplace.
Yeah, I'm glad you've raised an example, because we have been talking a little bit at an abstract level of solutions and problems and technologies. But do you have any other use cases or concrete examples where you can name the organization where your concept for infrastructure, or rather data center as a service, is bringing benefits? So where does it, when the rubber hits the road, what do you get? And do you have some use cases that illustrate that?
I don't have to point much further than our Life remote monitoring solution. This is a solution that's come out a couple years ago. Actually came partly with our chloride acquisition many years ago, but we've evolved it over the last several years. And this allows customers to really subscribe to us, to have us do the remote monitoring, remote management, analytics of what's happening, and in whenever possible, preventative care of their networks. And so Life is a great example of a solution that, with connectivity, with the right data flowing from the products, with the right IT gear and the right training of our personnel can take some of the workload away from the customer and allow us to deliver that solution. So that's one example of where we're delivering a service for our customers. We can also talk about, we are working with customers, and we can't expose who they are, but we can tell you that we have customers working with us to bring their data into our larger data lake so that we can help them better predict how various elements of their ecosystem will perform and really help them better understand when they need just-in-time service and maintenance versus break-fix service and maintenance. So kind of two different examples where Vertiv is providing services back to our customer. One is running a NOC on their behalf. Another is using the data lake that we've assimilated from billions of records to help customers who want to predict things themselves use the broader knowledge set of our company to do that.
Right. So when we talked at the beginning, we were saying there's so many great things going on in modern data center infrastructure. People are looking for good solutions to overcome the obstacles to get there. But economics plays a big role in that too. And it's important to be able to go back to the top echelon of your company and say, listen, here's the math. Here's why we think doing this data center modernization is really worth the investment. Is there something about the way you're doing that data lake, creating that intellectual property and insights that helps the economics? What's the TCO impact, and how do you know when you're doing this right in terms of dollars and cents?
Yeah, so it's difficult to generalize too much, but let me give you some metrics we care about. So stuff's going to break, but if we know when it's going to break, or even if it does break, we can understand exactly what happened, then we can have a much higher first-time fix rate. What does that mean? That means I don't have to come out twice. I don't have to take the system out of commission more than once, and we can have a better uptime. So that's one. Number two, by getting the data, by understanding what's going on with the network, time to repair. How long does it take us from when we get on site to when we can fix something? Certainly, it's better if you do it the first time, and it's also better if you have exactly what you need when you're there to perform the service exactly the way it needs to be done, so you can get in and out of there and have as minimal disruption with what they're trying to do, which is deliver a service for themselves or their customers. And then I think a third one that's important, and one that I think will grow in importance, is we're beginning to measure what we call service avoidance. And the way we measure service avoidance is, we'll call up a customer and we'll say, hey, based on all of this information, based on all of this prediction, based on what we see from your network or your systems, we think these 4 things need to be addressed in the next 30 days. If not, our data tells us that we'll be coming out there to fix something that broke as opposed to fixing it before it broke. So service avoidance or service simplification is another area that we're looking at. There's many more, SLAs and uptime and all of those, but when it comes to sort of the tactical benefits of having smarter products, being more connected, liberating data, consuming that data and using it to make better decisions as a service, those are some of the things that customers could or should expect differently.
And in order to enjoy those economic benefits through the Vertiv approach and through data center as a service, does this scale down and up? It certainly makes sense for the larger data center installations, but what about a small to medium-sized business? What about a remote office where it's a closet and a couple of racks? Does that make sense too? Does the economic and the productivity benefits scale down as well as scale up?
Yeah, well, I think if we look at our data, more customers who don't have all the expertise to manage and monitor their single phase or small 3-phase or CRV units, and they don't have the skill set, those are the customers that really appreciate what Vertiv can do to help them, right? It doesn't mean that they don't appreciate it as you go up the stack, because, as you go up the stack, what those customers appreciate isn't the fact that they can do some of those services themselves. They may be more of a self-service oriented customer, but what they increasingly are interested in is how we're using data, and put maybe their data into our data lake to better predict things they can't predict by looking at their own stuff. So I think the value shifts depending on where you're at in the stack of complexity and maturity and competency. And then I think it also varies based on, hyperscale, colo, enterprise, small enterprise, point of sale. So there are a number. This is why it's difficult, Dana, to sort of generalize. I think this is why the themes of connectivity, smarter products, edge ecosystems, data liberation. Those are the things that really, I think, are common almost across all those segments. How they apply and the value that's extracted in each segment can be slightly different.
So suffice to say, it's important that the data center as a service is highly customizable to whatever organization you are and wherever you are in that value chain.
I think that's absolutely right. Not everybody needs everything. And I remember the continuum that I shared earlier. Self-service, sort of think of that on the left, as a service on a right. It's not a binary conversation. Customers who want to do most of stuff themselves with technology, they may need only a little information or help from Vertiv. Customers who want most of their stuff to be managed by us, whether it's small systems or large systems, we have the capability of providing that as well. And so that's why I said this is a continuum, not an either or.
Okay, Steve, before we close out, let's take a little look to the future, peer into our crystal ball. I know that as you do data lakes and you get more and more data, that machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to be right around the corner, and it's going to allow you to have better prediction capabilities, do things that you just simply couldn't have ever done in the past. So what happens as these products get smarter, as we're collecting the data, and as we're analyzing that data with more powerful tools? What should we expect in the next several years when it comes to the smarter data center as a service?
Again, I think we're in the early stages, but it's a great question, Dana. I think there's two outcomes that I think will benefit all of us. One, that information with the right algorithms and the right analysis and information. One, it's going to allow us to build products that fail less and are increasingly smarter. So there's a circle of knowledge, right? Products produce information, go in the data lake, we run the right algorithms, look for the right pieces of information, feed that back into our products, and continually evolve the capability of our products as time goes on. So products will break less, products will need less service, products will be more reliable, and I think we should just expect that, just like you've seen in other industries. So that's number one. Number two, my hope and belief is that we move from a break-fix sort of mentality, or mentality is the wrong word, a break-fix environment where we're waiting for something to show up on a screen as an alarm and alert. We move from that to us being highly predictive and just in time. With that highly predictive and with that just in time as an industry, and certainly as Vertiv, some of the things I talked about earlier with better first time fix, some service avoidance, time for repair, all of those things are going to get better, which, by the way, just means one simple thing for our customers. They're going to have a more efficient data center. They're going to have a more well-tuned data center, and they're going to be able to operate with a higher rate of uptime. And so all of those things are, I think, going to result in goodness for both them and for us.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how automation and self-healing and increasingly intelligent data center designs are delivering what amounts to data centers as a service. And we've learned about modern data center strategies that extend to the computing edge and even beyond. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Steve Lalla, Executive Vice President of Global Services at Vertiv. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks, Dana.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining us for the sponsored BriefingsDirect Data Center Strategies interview. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Vertiv-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this on to your IT community and do come back next time.